Hi guys, I'm Jasmine Quick. Excuse me, bear with me, getting over a cold. But I wanted to present my proposal to you guys. Let me share the screen. And here we go. So let's start the show. Okay, so it's called A Look. It's called A Look into the Health of America's Inmates. This presentation will look to dissect the mental health issues an inmate faces while incarcerated. It examines their mental health and notes if their mental health state has anything to do with recidivism. We will also look to see how the pandemic affected the penal system. This type of research is important because in order to adequately change and reform what is wrong in the penal system, you have to locate and study the problem. Every participant in the study will sign the informed consent, which will clearly lay out in detail what they will be doing in the research. They will be assigned a number instead of using their names, how the research benefits the greater good, numbers that they can call should questions arise, and the fact that they will remain anonymous. So the overall purpose of this experiment is to let inmates know that they are in a safe space, that they will not be used by names, they will be used by numbers. Only I will have the numbers attached, know who the numbers are attached to as far as names go, and they have a right to privacy with me. The point of this is that I wanted to look at, one, see how the revolving door and recidivism affects the penal system, what demographics it affects, and how has the pandemic changed that. We all, I think, felt a little confined during the pandemic with all the restrictions, and I can only imagine what goes on for an inmate who's already confined, and then you strip away visitation rights. So the goal of this proposal is to look at both sides and to see, is there a way to better reform versus punish? Because when you punish someone, you just punish them for the crime, but you don't teach them what to do better next time so they don't do it. So I hypothesize that the worse the mental state, the more likely an offender will engage in violence and either commit suicide or engage in a lifelong career of crime. An inmate may go through both, where they may contemplate suicide, but instead of killing themselves for whatever reason they couldn't go through with it, they engage in the revolving door effect, which is also recidivism. They continue to come in and out of the system. There are 8 questions that this presentation hopes to answer. Some of the main questions being, is there a way to end the revolving door effect in prisons? How does recidivism affect communities? What communities are hit the hardest and most often? What is the mental state of those who are incarcerated while during a pandemic? Can this change? See if I can pull up my notes. It will not let me pull up my notes. So for my literature review, I did 8 articles. And what out of the 8 articles, what it stated was to first, let's focus on recidivism, right? Recidivism is high, especially among those who already come into jail with some mental illness. That could be depression, that could be schizophrenia, bipolarism, but excuse me, they are labeled with some mental illness when they come in. The articles I found about how the pandemic has affected the penal system is that we found that there was a higher rate of suicidal attempts and people completing suicide. We also found that inmates overall had noted higher levels of depression, as well as people in the public. So the Washington Post did a survey where they discussed how the public was dealing with the pandemic. and they noted higher levels of depression than pre-pandemic. And so I compared how we're in the public, we have our freedoms, and we're going through these changes, these restrictions, and and it's affecting us mentally. So you can only imagine for someone who's behind bars and has to be treated like a caged animal, how they feel, and what's going on with them mentally. And so how that, and why that is of concern, and why that should be of concern for us, is that once some of these people are going to be released back to the public, when you're in there, if you are not treated, if you are not performed when you come out, and all prison did was create a deeper, darker mental state for you, or it worsened your mental health, when they come out into the public, we have to deal with that. And that would affect us with crime rates, with everything. And so it's best to try to help these people while they're in the care of the penal system, and help them by giving them attachments or numbers, places, therapists they can call when they get out, if they feel urges, things of that nature, just to let them know they're not alone. At the end goal of this research is to hopefully reduce the crime rate by pinpointing what targets recidivism, the mental health state of those in the pandemic, and reforming within the penal system. So that's what these two articles go through. My theory is that the penal system simply just punishes those who have the displeasure of engaging with it. It does not treat nor aid in future success of its inmates. Those who become incarcerated will most likely experience some form of mental illness, typically depression, due to their freedom being stripped away. And I got this theory from my literature review, because what research showed, the penal system disproportionately institutionalizes minorities at a higher rate than their white counterparts, which is something we've known all along, and that's just in there because minorities need help. That's a target population that we should definitely look at. Culturally, therapy and things of that nature are not something that's promoted in minority communities as much as in white counterpart communities as well. So it's something that we should make normal. We should normalize positive mental health for these inmates, especially of the minority communities. Methods and data collection. The experiment relies heavily on qualitative research and will use non-experimental correlation research design. The experiment will take place in North Carolina, my home state, and we will go to 8 different jails and prisons around the state of North Carolina. So we will use we would just interchange jails and prisons. We will try to hit the more heavily populated prisons and jails first. And so our top 8 of all of those will be the ones we target. From each jail and from each prison, we'll take 20 inmates, all genders, all different backgrounds. We will know each. And then inmates will be given a self-administered questionnaire. So we'll give them their own privacy to fill out this questionnaire anonymously. They will have a slip or a box that they would turn the things into that just has their number, no name. And the questionnaire revolves around the mental health and physical health, how many times that they have been incarcerated. So this will pick up on not only their mental health, especially during a pandemic, but it will also pick up on their repeat offenders, if they've already receded or if they have already engaged in a revolving door effect. Experiments will take place within the jails and prisons I mentioned. After completing their questionnaire, inmates will meet with an on-site therapist or psychologist to discuss their mental health and target their reason for recidivism. So some of these questions that are on here, we don't know what are targets for people, what are triggers for people. So if you felt triggered during the questionnaire, if you felt like something didn't rub you the right way, once you complete with the questionnaire, you have that ability that everyone, it's mandatory that you meet with a psychologist or a therapist. Now, whether you use that time wisely or not, that's completely up to you. It's not forced, but we want everyone to meet with the psychologist after they complete the questionnaire to make sure that they are feeling safe. And if there's anything they want to get out, they can. So hypothetical data, and this is just something I drew up by gathering all the information from my literature reviews. So here we have suicidal thoughts. The short bar is pre-pandemic. The tall bar is post-pandemic. The blue is the public. The orange are the inmates. So as you can see, pre or post-pandemic, peri or post-pandemic. Well, we don't have post-pandemic yet, but peri-pandemic, inmates still have a higher rate of suicidal thoughts than the public. And then we have here suicides in prison. So what you have in the blue are nonviolent offenders. What you have in the orange are violent offenders. What we found through the literature review is that most of suicides are done by violent offenders, possibly because of all the years they occurred on their sentence, and they feel like there's no hope. You know, there's a vast array of reasons why people commit suicide in prison, but what the data shows is that nonviolent offenders commit suicide at a lower rate than violent offenders. So my findings, which I've briefly discussed, our studies show a correlation between incarceration and the increased rate of suicide and suicidal thoughts amongst prisoners. The Washington Post also showcased how the exclusion and isolation of COVID-19 has caused suicide rates within the regular population to increase, which would be us, the public. By combining the studies based on the mental health and the penal system to increase the rate of suicide within the public after just 1 year into the pandemic can show a positive correlation amongst the suicide rate amongst inmates due to the pandemic. To define the degrees of freedom, the equation will be DF equals N minus 1, where the degree of freedom equals the sample size minus the parameters needed to calculate during the analysis. For this research, the degrees of freedom will be 70, alpha level will be 0.05, which shows that there's a 5% chance that will show a difference when no difference actually exists in the research. Future research. For future research endeavors, I believe the penal system would thoroughly benefit from closely examining and revising their mental health programs, as well as looking into an inmate's overall health. If there was a revision on how mental health was treated within the penal system and inmates were given proper care, I hypothesize that the suicide rate would decrease and potentially the recidivism rate, which then affects the overall crime rate. Conclusion: in order to decrease the rate of recidivism and ultimately the crime rate, the penal system must seek to reform, not punish, the inmates within its walls. Inmates have an increased chance of having their mental health decline and committing suicide. What the pandemic did was give the public a sample of the restrictions and mental drain inmates deal with on a daily basis. With this in mind, there must be a call to action to reform what we know as the American justice system. And these are my references from the literature review. And my apologies again. I ask that you guys bear with me as I'm dealing with this cold, but I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy my proposal.